Welcome to Public Health Matters, where we talk about matters in public health. My name is Jane Goodman, Public Health Strategist with the Division of Public Health and Community Services. I'm joined today by Jo Muscott of Bridges, New Hampshire. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much.
Jo, I'm sorry.
Amy Jo, well, either one. I go by either one.
So welcome, and tell us, you are the Education Coordinator at Bridges, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Tell us first and foremost about Bridges and what its mission is and a little bit about its history.
Okay, so it's Bridges Domestic and Sexual Violence Support, just so you know. And we are one of 13 crisis centers in the state of New Hampshire that supports victims and survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault.
Wow.
The battered women's movement started in the 70s, and we've been around for a long time since then. But now that there is the coalition, there's kind of more of a gestalt in terms of how we work throughout the state. So we each have catchment areas, and our catchment area is Greater Nashua and Milford. And our area goes from Wilton and Lineborough all the way to Pelham and Salem. So we have 14 communities in our catchment area.
Wow, that's big when you add in Salem. And
yep,
I don't think of that as the Greater Nashua region.
Yep, it's quite a large area. There are many things that we do as a crisis center. We do advocacy. We do prevention, which is really important. And we also help people with some of our housing programs as well. But Bridges is a place where people can come for free and confidential support. And I think that's the piece that many people don't realize. And we have services not only during the day, but we have services 24 hours a day.
And when you're talking about not only free, but confidential, and we're talking about issues of domestic abuse and sexual abuse, I mean, it's really critical that this stuff stay confidential if somebody's being pursued or that kind of thing. So that's like a critical piece of your mission, I would imagine.
It is. Yes. And also to empower our clients. If you look at the dynamics of domestic violence or sexual violence, a lot of it is about disempowering one partner. And so we do everything we can to meet clients where they are, to help them in ways that they need help, and to support their choices. Because sometimes their choices might not be something that feel comfortable to us. We might think, let's say, that they're in a pretty dangerous situation, but we do what we can to give them options and then support them as they make the choices. So we do not dictate what they do.
Right, and it's often very hard, from what I understand, if you are a victim of this kind of abuse, to get out of it or to stop feeling, to advocate for yourself and to get out of that stressful situation.
Absolutely, because what happens is that in a healthy relationship, it's balanced, it's comfortable, it's mutual. Both partners feel part of the process and really happy and comfortable in the process. It's nurturing, it's nourishing, it's fun. It's a lot of good things that make you feel good. But when that shift starts to happen and when one person starts to impose power and control over the other person, that usually happens first in an emotional way. And then what happens is that someone, if it's abusive, is actually imposing power and control over another person and limiting choices, limiting access to friends.
You can't go out with so-and-so. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so it becomes really complicated, but also the person that's controlled loses their voice. And loses their own power. And it can take up to 7 to 10 times for somebody to leave an abusive relationship.
Wow, that's incredible. So what do you do prior to that? So how do you, I mean, is there some way to like teach the signs that you're in that abusive relationship? Because I think some of them could be pretty subtle, not recognized right away, especially if it's emotional abuse. And then how do you recognize, wow, I am becoming a victim?
Yep. So what happens is people come to Bridges, and a lot of the time, because it isn't physical, they kind of don't understand why they've even walked through the door. And maybe a friend or a therapist or a doctor suggested that they either call or come into our office. And we do what we can at that point to educate them in the same way that we're having this conversation now. And we have a tool that's called the Power and Control Wheel that we use. And oftentimes what I'll do when someone comes in is I'll say, you know, take a minute and check off the type of abuse that is happening to you in the relationship that brought you here today. And a lot of the time they just start checking off the emotional pieces and the verbal pieces and the isolation and the financial pieces, right? All the things, all the dynamics that are really impacting them and disempowering them, when in fact they didn't know about that before.
Right, so as you're presenting, like, oh yeah, that is happening.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't have access to my bank accounts, or I don't have any control. I have to ask for grocery money or those kind of things.
Absolutely. And then you also talk to them about how they're feeling. Many of us have been in situations where we're walking on eggshells and feeling uncomfortable. And if someone's in a relationship and that's how they're feeling, that's concerning, right? And so we want them to understand that it's also really important for them to really check in with themselves and how they're feeling so that they can better pinpoint what might be triggering that, pinpoint that something might be concerning, and seek help if indeed they're ready to do that.
So well, I don't want to get ahead of myself, so let's back up.
Okay.
So we always, because of the times we're in, we always talk a little bit about COVID-19.
Yep.
We can't help ourselves because it just lives right alongside us.
Absolutely.
And you have a new facility.
We do.
That was completed. Was that completed last year? Or?
No, it was, well, last year. We moved in the middle of October of 2020. So it's only been a few months.
Oh, okay. So tell us about the new facility and
it's great.
Everything
it's
about
great.
it.
So we were on East Pearl Street, right across from the Nashua Soup Kitchen.
Oh, okay.
And that was a great facility, but it was very small and kind of it was cozy and homey, which was nice about it. But then when COVID-19 hit, it was really hard because it was very hard for us to serve clients in the building. The new space is at least 2, if not 2.5 times the size of the old space.
Nice.
Everything is state of the art. It's an old building. It's the old Red Cross building on Concord Street. So it not only has been restored with beautiful features like certain stained glass and molding and all that kind of thing, but we've done a lot to really make it workable and comfortable for our clients. Our client rooms are very, very comfortable. They're still small for COVID, but we also have a wonderful children's room, which is a large room with a glass partition, so that parents can actually, if they're coming, let's say, to do a restraining order, can have a conversation with the advocate, and their kids can be on the other side, can see their parent, but can also play and not be privy to what the parent is talking about.
And I think we have a picture of that too, so we'll pop that up on there. That's a nice, it's a nice image and it's really lovely. Do you have that supervised, or it's just the glass so that you can look through?
No, it's actually just the glass, but I mean, it's literally the same space.
Yeah.
So it's just a really great way to keep children safe and also to really help parents keep that boundary, which is hard a lot of the time for them. So that's a wonderful, wonderful asset that we now have. We also have a great conference room space that we didn't have before, so that we'll be able at some point, which we're not doing yet now because of COVID, but we'll be able to do a lot more of our support groups and functions in that space, which is really great.
And I'm just going to interrupt because you seem to have a lot of support groups available, and quite a list, in fact, that we can also put up there if people are interested. Are they still going on? Are you doing them via Zoom, or are you just trying to continue
the minute
that?
COVID hit, I facilitate a lot of the support groups, and it's one of the things that I enjoy the most, only because it really gives you a chance to connect with people and to see them make different choices and grow and heal from the experiences that they've had. So right now we have groups for domestic violence, people who've experienced domestic violence and sexual assault. We have actually 4 groups going right now of that. We are hoping to get a teenage group underway. Part of it is just trying to find groups of people that kind of would work well together. So we do have something called Breaking Barriers, which is where non-offending caregivers and their kids come, and the non-offending caregivers, parents, adults are in one room talking about how to support their children, and the children are in another room really talking about how to heal from their own trauma. And then they come together at certain points. It's concurrent. So it's a pretty wonderful model.
So when you're saying non-offending, that's the parent that is not in prison.
Not in
Or
not or
charged.
that wasn't an abuser
I
or
see.
wasn't, yes. So
Okay.
meaning this a safe adult, whoever that person is. So there's
Okay.
a safe adult along with a child, and the 2 groups run at the same time with different advocates
Sure.
facilitating them, but they are brought together at certain times during the cycle as well. And our groups run 10 to 12 weeks. We find that it gives people a chance to kind of learn and then to also try to practice things on their own, which is a really important part of the healing process.
Right.
So we do that. We do that. So we do a cycle, and then we usually break for about a month, and then we start another cycle.
Okay, and do you have people that come back, or do you
We
have?
do have people that come back, but we also have something called a Thrivers model, which is for people who basically want to continue checking in, but aren't going through a preliminary curriculum, because it is very psychoeducational. We cover things like boundaries and healthy relationships and coping skills, it's self-care, which is really important. So we do what we can to give people skills from where they are to where they're going rather than where they've been.
Do you have any kind of employment services, or is that, do you refer them out for that? I mean, if they're fleeing, or
if they're fleeing and they show up at our shelter, our emergency shelter, we now have 4 apartments in the emergency shelter. We have staff that actually help case manage and help them come up with whatever the next steps are for them to go into a transitional living model.
Okay.
So there's a lot of support, but part of what we do also is network and have community partners, because we want people to really get connected to resources in the community that will help them in whatever area it is. I mean, some people come and they have immigration issues that they're dealing with. Some people come to us and they're fleeing from a different state. Some people come to us and they have disabilities and they need certain kinds of access, or they have children that need special education or certain kinds of support. So we work with community partners all over the area, and part of what we do is to facilitate that for them.
Well, so you guys are busy.
We are busy.
So you mentioned your shelter, which when we talked prior to the show, found really fascinating, and I guess it made my heart hurt a little bit that you mentioned that, you have a shelter. Pre-COVID, you got it outfitted into 4 separate units.
Yep.
But it's secret. The location is secret.
Yep.
And I thought, wow, when you've really thought of everything. And, can you just tell us a little bit more about the shelter?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think that what's so difficult is that when people leave a traumatic situation or relationship, there's so many things for them. They're in their fight, flight, freeze mode. They, many of them have significant, not all, but many have mental health implication and impact from that, or physical health, because we know that trauma impacts all of us in different ways. And we think about children who have been impacted, and ACEs, the adverse child experiences that we all are just so interested in and trying to think about how to address in our community. I mean, a lot of us are doing that together. And so part of the issue is to kind of see how to support each person and meet them where they are rather than to overfunction for them. And I think any parent knows that it's sometimes easier to overfunction rather than really to think about how to nurture resilience or nurture independence. So we've done that. We were the first shelter in New Hampshire to move to this model. We're the first domestic violence shelter. And what really it helps with is when you have people in a communal living environment, and they've all experienced trauma, navigating relationships with each other is incredibly challenging.
Right.
And even pre-COVID. I mean, obviously
Right. So
now with
prior
COVID,
to this renovation, it was just a communal
it
living
was a communal
space.
living situation where they shared a kitchen, they shared a living room, and they had their own bedroom spaces. But yeah, it was hard because I don't know about you, but I mean, it's hard to live with people that you choose to live with and that you love, right?
Right.
And think about people who are strangers who have also, experienced incredible trauma, many of which has to do with how they keep boundaries, right? Because that's what we navigate in relationships. And it was just really, really challenging to be in a communal space. So what this means is that people really can focus on their own healing rather than navigating relationships with the other people that are also trying to heal. So we're very, very excited and proud about that model.
Yeah, it sounds great. And how long do people typically stay in your shelter before do you have like a time frame, or are there like goals?
Yeah, there's not really a time frame. There are goals. What happens is when people come into shelter, we figure out what they need. We set goals with them. And part of it is moving into transitional living. It might be getting a job. It might be, getting the kind of treatment that they need. But we set certain goals with the thought that they can be more and more independent. And so that's really how it's framed. It could be, it could be a few months. It could be, it's usually short term, but it's short term. So
Right.
it really depends on the needs of each person.
Sure. And you have to be flexible because everyone is different.
Absolutely. And we also have, which is really cool, is a transitional housing program.
Okay.
So we connect to transitional housing programs in the area, but because so many of our clients are underserved, we have a cultural advocate that is very connected to them, number one. And number two is there are people that aren't eligible for other transitional housing programs. And if they are not, they can be part of our transitional housing program. And what's really wonderful about that program is that people can stay actually, they find an apartment within a certain price range, and it is subsidized over a period of 2 years, but the subsidy actually fades so that after the 2-year period, they can stay where they've been living for 2 years and support themselves there.
Nice.
So, they don't have to pick up and move to another location, relocate with children. It's a wonderful model.
Yeah, it sounds like a great model.
Yep,
To get people back
absolutely.
on their feet and comfortably and at their own pace.
Absolutely.
So I noticed too that you have a child advocacy program.
Yep. So
You got a lot of programs. You're very busy.
Yes, we are. So the Child Advocacy Center is in Nashua, and we are connected to them. We have a staff person which goes basically to support families through the Child Advocacy Center, which is a place where children who have experienced or witnessed domestic violence or any kind of assault can go and tell their story once with a whole panel of professionals, so that rather than telling their story over and over again, they tell their story once, it's put onto a DVD, and it's locked into evidence. So the people that might be kind of listening in but not present in the interview might be the police department, the county attorney's office, at DCYF. We have a very close relationship with DCYF, and we actually have an advocate which is part-time at DCYF and part-time at Bridges.
Okay.
So there's lots of collaborative staff that work in different, different community partners and areas of the city.
which you really have to do because resources are limited.
Absolutely.
So we have to work together to move things forward.
Yep.
I'm just peeking, and what you're saying too with the child advocacy program really speaks to this whole adverse childhood experience, which you mentioned is a big, a lot of agencies are working on it as the division. We're looking at our community health improvement plan in the framework of adverse childhood experiences.
Yep. And knowing that if children, any of us, but we've experienced trauma, that does impact our health outcomes and our mental health and functional outcomes. And so what we really want to do is do what we can to be aware of what those challenges are, but also to create protective factors in the community.
Right.
And that could be, a therapist. That also could be, a teacher. But it's all about creating relationships so that people feel like they have the support and the hope that they need.
Yeah, it's a tall order.
It is. It is.
It's a tall order. So there's some awareness months going on. There's the January is National Stalking Awareness Month.
Yep, absolutely.
So,
and
what do you do for that, for stalking?
A lot of my job is actually prevention. And obviously my job has changed since COVID hit because I was in the schools all the time and training up to 4,000 to 6,000 people a year pre-COVID. And then COVID hit, and we had to, in the same way that we're now doing virtual groups for support groups, which are actually working out beautifully. We actually are also doing education and prevention virtually as well, working with health teachers, working with school counselors, working with nursing students, psychology students. Working with all agencies so they better understand the dynamics of domestic violence, what healthy relationships look like. Sometimes with nurses, we're helping them with the screening tools so that they know what to look for. The same with human trafficking. We want to make sure that people understand what kinds of challenges people who've experienced human trafficking have experienced and how that might impact their behavior. Just because if the more aware we are, the better we can be together to keep our community safe.
Absolutely, and the younger we start too.
Absolutely. I actually do training in preschool.
Yeah, to look for the signs and how to ask for help and those kind of things.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned it's also Human Trafficking Prevention Month.
Yep.
Do we have a human trafficking problem in New Hampshire?
We
Is
do.
it something?
We do, and it's not, people don't think about it because they think more about, cities and, maybe Nashua or Manchester, but it's everywhere. And really in front of us, but we might not be aware of it.
Right.
There's, a tree company that had people that they brought in to do labor for them that were promised, a job and promised a place to live, but in fact were basically slaves. They were put into a very uncomfortable place to live. I think it was like a garage with a blanket. But there are terrible situations. And so, and also young, like teenagers, many of whom don't have the protective factors that we're looking at, look for that connection other places or are found by people that see that they might be vulnerable or accessible. So it's there. I mean, it's not like New York City maybe,
right.
But it's more prevalent in New Hampshire than you'd think.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm glad you guys are in place to at least maybe remediate some of that. And then in February, we're a little ahead of ourselves, but it'll be here before we know it. We have Black History Month, of course, and Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. And you mentioned you're in the schools, so that's an important place to start too.
Absolutely.
Creating that respect among couples and understanding, what it's like to be in a relationship and what is a respectful relationship. And if they're not modeling that, not getting that modeling at home, then, how can you provide that?
Absolutely. So a lot of it is, again, understanding the dynamics of a healthy relationship and also understanding what concerning behaviors are. And not only in terms of teen dating, also just in terms of friendships. I don't know about you, but I remember in my childhood having friendships that were very controlling. And
Yes.
so
Don't bring it all back to me.
sorry. But I think that it's something that, so many of us have experienced. And it's really having friendships that are healthy is a really great way to begin our lifelong relationship journey, right?
Absolutely.
So that's why we talk about boundaries and we talk about comfortable feelings and uncomfortable feelings and emotional literacy with very young children, and also who they can ask for help.
Great. Yeah, you read about, I've done about emotional intelligence and how important that is to develop in young people, or just to start them down that path of developing emotional intelligence. So that they can be aware of a dangerous situation or not necessarily even dangerous, but problematic.
Absolutely.
And can find the right person.
Absolutely. So we really want them to identify who their safe people are.
Are there ways to get involved with Bridges?
There are. We have a wonderful event coming up, which is Love is in the Air, which is usually an in-person event, but we are doing it virtually. So it's Love is in the Air at Home edition.
Yes.
And if you go
very familiar with the at home editions.
Yes, and if you go to bridgesnh.org on the website, you will see how you can get involved with that. There's a silent auction. There's a lot of wonderful, wonderful things that are part of that event. It's our biggest event of the year, and it's really a fundraising event for us, which is so crucial. So that's one thing that's coming up.
And we want to make sure, I'm just going to give you an extra plug here because nonprofits are having a really hard time. The community's been very generous to a lot of nonprofits during COVID. But these signature events, Love is in the Air and those kind of things, what people don't realize is that they cover a lot of operating expenses and a lot of really important things for agencies. And it is harder to reach people virtually because we're so tired of looking at our screens. But if you can find it in your heart to stop by Bridges, nh.org, and just, look around, look at the silent auction, look at, do you want to just send a donation? Because it's been much harder for now. I speak from a little experience, having planned a virtual event, going from a very live, vivacious event to
it's a very
to
strange...
6 people in a studio.
It's very, very different. It really, really is.
Yeah. So I hope that you get the support you need.
We're looking forward to it. We really are. And then we also love our volunteers. We have an incredible volunteer program. In fact, I started as a volunteer at Bridges, and it was wonderful. And so we really love our volunteers. If there are people that are interested in psychology and helping people, nurses, retired nurses, we have a 24-hour support line. And so people can call Bridges even at 4 a.m, and someone will get back to them in 10 minutes, always. And one of the ways that makes that possible is that we have wonderful volunteers that we work with. So the volunteer training is almost 40 hours.
Oh, wow.
And it's very intensive. It's a wonderful training. We run it 3 times a year. It's run in, we just did the January one and then June and September. And so we do train people, and we need to do that for confidentiality purposes. So you really can't even work in our office without doing the training. There are people that actually volunteer that don't go through the training that can come and do educational work with me because there is no confidentiality issue.
Okay.
But we really appreciate our volunteers. And at times we have a stipend position, which is also starts as a volunteer position, but has additional training for people that want to actually do advocacy in the hospital. We are also, when people go into the hospital and they've been a victim of either domestic violence or sexual violence, the emergency room staff calls bridges to send an advocate in to support that person through whatever examination, procedure, sexual assault kit they're going through, and to help them make the choices, to make sure that they understand what their choices are, and to make sure that they have a safe place to go. So our crisis advocates do get a stipend, but they actually are trained initially as volunteers.
Wow. So you guys are, I keep saying it, but I'm just amazed by all the services you have. I don't know how many people are on staff at Bridges?
There's over 20 now.
Okay, so it's a pretty decent sized organization.
Absolutely.
And you're in Nashua and Milford, you mentioned.
We're in Nashua and Milford. And our main office is in Nashua. Our Milford office is smaller and is a satellite office. But many, we serve a lot of people in that western part of our catchment area. So we are also in Milford.
So finally, we have to push something that we've been working on together, which is the Mayor's Opioid Task Force Legislative Breakfast.
Right.
And the Mayor's Opioid Task Force is something that you've been involved with, obviously, much longer than I have because I'm newer to the division. But just give us a quick blurb on what that is.
So every year there is a breakfast that has a different theme, often a different theme. I mean, being connected right now is really what's important. And so we have a program that we usually run, and we invite legislators to come to learn about the different challenges in our community and ways that they can possibly support the work that we're doing and serve the needs of the community. And so this year we are doing it, which is really cool.
Virtually.
Yes, we're doing it virtually, which is wonderful. And we also are serving breakfast to the legislators, which is really cool as well, I think.
Right, you and I might be driving cars to
we
deliver
might
breakfast.
be all over the place to serve breakfast to people. But it's a wonderful opportunity to not only meet legislators, but to also help them become more aware of all the different things that we're trying to do in the community to keep the community healthy and safe.
Yeah, so it's really an important event, and that is next Friday,
It is
the
next
29th.
Friday.
So you can sign up online at bit.ly/motive, the Mayor's Opioid Task Force, -LB for Legislative Breakfast, -REG, R-E-G. You can also call our office if you need more information about how to register. But we'd love to have people's participation, especially if you're working with substance misuse in our community. This is your chance to really hear what some of the organizations have been doing and to maybe even advocate for some policy changes. And that's so important because the opioid crisis has not disappeared during COVID.
Absolutely.
They had a little recess, as in fewer overdoses, but it's not over. And we still have a lot of work to do in that area.
Absolutely.
So we want to get people involved.
We do want people to be involved. And, even domestic violence, the reporting to DCUAF and in terms of domestic violence when COVID hit really seemed to go down, but it didn't mean that it was happening any less.
Right.
And so we really need to be vigilant in terms of ways that we can support our community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, well, Amy Jo, this has been a delight. I mean, it's a hard topic to hear about, but the work that your Bridges is doing in our community is so critical and so integrated with so many amazing community partners. I always just am amazed when I have guests on the show how much this community really pulls together and works together.
Yeah, and it does. It's one of the things that has really impressed me over the last, I would say, 4 years is the fact that so many community partners are collaborating in a very powerful way.
Yeah.
And we're honored to be part of that.
Well, again, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. And I want to thank you for joining us. And just a reminder that if you do need a COVID-19 test, we do offer a free testing clinic every Tuesday from 3 to 5 p.m. at the National Guard Armory. You can sign up online or you can call the COVID hotline at 589-3456. you.